So good morning. Welcome, guys, to this beautiful Thursday morning and today's training. Today's gonna be blunt. Today's gonna be confrontational. So I'm just giving you a heads up. If you're feeling sensitive, if you're feeling like you need delicacy today, don't proceed forward, because I'm gonna get real clear on 3 specific issues that we're wrestling with. I see a lot of you wrestling with these things, and it has to do with how the brain interprets information and where we're coming from. So this may be a long episode. This can be confronting, though, because I'm going to just be blunt. Okay? All right, so if you're new to me, I'm Marshall Burtcher. I help codependents break free of their love addiction, their codependency, and rediscover happiness, healthy relationships, and well-being again in their world. I do that by helping them break free of their fantasy and restore peace and connection to their reality, come to know who they are, and then learn how to share themselves using my what, how, who method of relating. So before we get to today's topic, I need to share this out to the community. The community is your safe haven, where you can find guidance, you can find support, you can find inspiration, you can find tools that actually work. Now, there's a trick with these tools, especially if they're my tools. You have to practice them, because there's no instant healing in the world, and that's one of these confrontations we're going to be talking about today. There's no instant healing. Alright, so let's share this out. If you're looking for that community, the group, the link is above on Facebook, below on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Guys, I appreciate you supporting me the way you do. I'm just a small dude in a basement apartment that's discovered some shit that works reliably, because I've tested it thousands of times on different people over the last 12 years, and I appreciate your support. All right, I'm going to get over here. Nice to see you, Robin. Goodness. All right. Accountability, fantasy, and abuse, making sense of reality. We're going to start with abuse. Now, there's one rule with abuse. You don't cause it. Period. Second rule is, you didn't earn it. Period. See, these I put in a direct, clear, and simple fashion because you need to wrestle with them. As part of the fantasy element here is the false belief that we did something to earn the way we were treated by another human being. We didn't earn it. You don't earn abuse. You don't earn love. People react the way they react based on their conditions, based on their psychology, based on what's going on in them. And I encourage you to prove this to yourself, and there's an easy way of doing this. You can actually observe it for yourself. If you go out into the world, you can watch 2 different people react to the same situation differently. That is the proof that you do not cause people to treat you a certain way. People treat you a certain way based on their programming, based on where they are, what they understand, what their history is. The Gottman Institute calls this a map. They have this concept called the Sound House Theory, and behind that is this thing called the Love Map. The Love Map outlines the individual's past, their traumas, what they've been through, what they got and did not get in their childhood and their teen years, and this all shaped them. This shapes us, and it explains why people do what people do. This also explains why we can't change them and why our efforts to get them to change fail repeatedly, because there is no way to change someone. People change themselves, and there's an important function behind this. There's this concept called personal autonomy. Personal autonomy means the person is their own authority. You are your own authority. Joe down the street's his own authority. I'm my own authority. Now, the only reason someone else's behaviors or information would change me is because I agree to the change. I agree with it. So I shape myself to it. Codependents do this all the time. It's called external orientation. We make them the authority, and because they're the authority, I change. I don't believe myself. I don't occupy the space of my own power. Instead, they're right, I'm wrong, even though they're the abuser. See the issue here? See how we're getting ourselves locked into an unescapable maze where we're abused, we're manipulated, we're controlled? This is how that happens. So to get back to this idea of personal autonomy, this is why people, you can't change them. They can't change you. You agree to the change at either a subconscious automatic programmed level or at a conscious consensual level. But either way, there's an agreement going on that then facilitates the shift, whatever that is. If the person you're with doesn't change when you ask them to change, that's a big signal. Now, if the person you're with is abusive and you call them out on their shit and they don't change, you need to leave. See, this gets into another element of the fantasy. I call this the primacy of emotions. So in the From Addiction to Connection course, we go really, really deep on this because this is the heart of your misery. It's where it all spawns from. It's the center of the codependent universe, the fantasy. See, the fantasy has a lot of different, it has 4 different components, and it's got a structure operating in the background that helps you think you're going to get the love you need from this person. And if you get that love you need from them, you're lovable. That's the fundamental behind it. If I can get someone to love me, I'm lovable. Which means I've now undone the tragedy of being rejected and abandoned and unwanted by so-and-so in the past. Whether it's a spouse, whether it's a peer, whether it's your parents. This is the crux of that internalized wound that says I'm unlovable. I call it the love wound. I haven't talked about that in quite some time, but the love wound has 3 elements to it. The first element is I'm not, no one would love me. No one would want my love is the second element, and I am unlovable because of that. I don't love me because somebody doesn't love me. Nobody would love me because I'm not lovable. I'm only lovable if somebody loves me. That's how it translates. This gets us into real trouble. But that's also based on the fantasy. It's a fantasy that someone else's love defines us. And in childhood development, we get into what's called attachment and identity development. It's called individuation. And a child's sense of self is defined by the way the parent reflects back to the child the parent's experience of the child. So if you grew up in an environment where the parent was neglectful, you're going to wonder if you exist. If you grew up in an environment where the parent was abusive, you're going to wonder if you're a burden, or if you're too much, or if you're wrong, or you're bad, or you're intrinsically unworthy, or shameful. If you grew up in an environment where both are going on, you're going to feel like you shouldn't exist. You're going to wonder, do your needs matter? Are they bad? Are they wrong? Am I wrong? Am I bad? Am I intrinsically a terrible person, a sinful thing, a mistake? I know that's how I felt. I mean, I was just doing some clearing work earlier this week where I discovered an aspect of myself that was like, I'm a burden. I'm just stupid because mom gets so frustrated with me. And I started to realize that my mother couldn't help me understand things because she didn't understand what I needed. And that really isn't her fault, by the way. I mean, I'm a parent. I get it. There's things I didn't know. I don't know everything. So there's generosity to that. But now I understand that it wasn't even a me thing either. And it wasn't really a her thing. It was just this, we're human and we don't have this awareness yet, right? So when it comes back to this idea of how we are shaped by parental feedback, this shapes our lovability, and then it creates this fantasy in us that if I can change the other person to love me, I win. I'm finally valuable. And it heals. We think it would heal that wound. Guys, that wound is not a result of not being able to get somebody to love us. That wound is a result of being unloved. Okay. We needed the love. We didn't need to earn it. We just needed it. Now, whether the parent could do it or not, this is one of the big rubs in growing out of your trauma, is discovering the validity of your pain because of the neglect you've gone through, regardless of what they could do or not do. Okay? Because this gets into an acceptance of where they're at and going, you know, I didn't get what I needed. And I can honor that. I can bring legitimization to it. I don't need them anymore to acknowledge it. And that's a hard place to go, because this is why we don't move on from toxic relationships, is because we're seeking this closure. We're seeking an admittance and an acknowledgement and a remorse on their part for the impact they had on us, and a sense of they actually valued and cared about us, so that we can kind of put the book closed and move on, so that we feel whole. Wholeness, when it comes to neglect and abuse, is achieved by retrieving from them our actual wholeness. It's about coming back into a relationship of reality, going, I have a fantasy that they loved me and they don't know how to show it. I have a fantasy that I could change them. If I could just do it differently, it would have worked out differently. I would have had a better relationship with them. I have a fantasy that they could change, right? But when we look at the pattern of behavior, what do we see? We see that they don't change. And that's what we have to confront. This is where the accountability component starts to come into play. See, we are not accountable for the abuse, ever. We didn't create it, we didn't earn it. We are accountable for our fantasy. We are accountable for what we want to believe about them, while ignoring what they have actively done and not done. We have to come to terms with that. We have to confront that in ourselves. This is where change happens. Is like, yeah, I keep choosing this. I keep ignoring this over here, and I keep maximizing this over there. So I maximize the love, I maximize the fantasy, I maximize the good feelings, I maximize euphoria. But I'm ignoring the pain they put me through. I'm ignoring the crazy that put me in bed for months. I'm ignoring the financial exploitation. I'm ignoring the sense of crazy I've been living with. The emptiness, the constant fighting, the never-ending conflict. See, that's what we have to own. That's what we have to confront first. See, a lot of times with codependence, we're like, well, what did I do wrong? There's things I did wrong. I chose this too. Yes, there's things you did wrong in it, sure. The place we start is with that fantasy. This is that confronting element that wakes us up. To go, I am seeing this person as not what they are, but as I think they should be or could be. And that's called the fantasy of potential. And this is a blunt thing right here. So I'm just going to give you a heads up. This probably won't be pleasant to hear. But you do not know their fantasy, their potential. You don't know that. You have to come to a place of honesty with yourself, going, their potential is my fantasy. I don't know their potential. I have no business determining their potential. None. It's none of your business. It's outside your yard. You have to come back to you. Go, I need to deal with the reality of what's going on. And that's hard work. That's hard to confront. It's hard, but it's necessary, because this is breaking you free of the chain of this fantasy. Sobriety is blunt. Sobriety stings. Sobriety is rough. until we get used to it. Because the more we press against reality, the more it presses back. Whereas fantasy just kind of goes through. It's not reliable, but reality is. Reality connects us back to ourselves, back to what is real. And that's what we need to acknowledge within ourselves. I have a fantasy about their potential. I'm out of line. I'm out of order. I need to get back in my yard. I need to start respecting them for the person they are. And this, I know it sounds a little perplexing, but if we respect them the way they are, then we can acknowledge what they are and walk away if they don't work for us. This comes into another element of abuse, accountability, and reality, or fantasy and reality. So abuse teaches us to be tolerant of neglect, of violence against our boundaries, against our emotions, against our person. It teaches us to maximize love so that we can cope with it, right? Because if we grew up in abuse, we learn to cope. We learn this thing called undue tolerance. We're tolerating things that are intolerable. They will shape us. They will tear us down. They will destroy us, because abuse is a destructive process against another human being. There is no way to build tolerance to this and thrive in your world, because the tolerance means you're shaving parts of yourself off to get them to stop reacting that way, because you aren't designed to tolerate this. You are designed for love. You are designed for safety. You are designed for peace. You're designed for being nurtured and cared for. You're designed for creativity and for play. You're not designed to tolerate abuse. Now, abuse, my definition of abuse, is a persistent violation of boundaries, the attack on person, feelings, wants, needs, and identity, preferences, limits, likes, and dislikes. It's the shaming of these things. It's the guilting of these things. It's the questioning of these things. It is any violence against the body, emotionally, physically, sexually, spiritually. It is the violation of identity, someone telling you who you are when you didn't ask for their feedback. Somebody telling you are wrong, you are stupid, you are dumb. Because people don't tell you you're wrong, because a lot of times we are wrong. So that one doesn't really fit. But how they do it can really matter. And, there's an aspect of where that can fall into as well, because if you know an experience happened in ABC order, you know it because that's the facts, and they tell you you're wrong, and they tell you you don't know what you're talking about or you're crazy, that's abuse. That's called gaslighting. So there's always a nuance on these things. So when it comes to abuse, we've developed this undue tolerance. And that blinds us to the pain we're enduring. It blinds us to our unmet need. And what this does is it grooms you. It preps you for the euphoria that comes in when you get love bombed. When they start showering you with positive, loving attention, gifts, words of affirmation. Because you're a dry desert, and that's water on a dry desert, and it just comes alive. You come alive with it. You're literally prepped to go into a euphoric state and believe that that euphoric state equals truth, equals that this is the one, this is the person I'm supposed to be with because of how powerful it feels, or how familiar it is, or how they see me. That's not a signal of that. It's actually a signal of the neglect and abuse you've endured. It's a signal of what's going on deeper within you in your unmet needs, your attachment distress, your pain. And that's what we have to confront. Because the fantasy is an attempt to try to bypass the pain and get the need met without having to go through that distress. Makes sense. It's kind of brilliant in my opinion. But it's a fantasy still. We have to confront that. That's when we get to accountability again. That's where you start. It's like, wow, I've got a fantasy. In the fantasy, you got to observe your function of the fantasy. It's like, well, this person was very toxic and very mean to me. And now he's saying all these things, or she's saying all these things that are so kind and so loving, and they're sending me articles, and they're making promises, and I don't really know. That's the fantasy cycle, because you're being love bombed, which makes you confused, which puts you into a state of freeze and fawning, which gets you back into the loop. Part of this is the sobriety of acknowledging and accepting that if abuse is present in a relationship, it's time to end it. It's time to walk away, because if they don't own it and they don't correct it, this is an unsafe person for your well-being. That has to become your bare minimum. That has to become the deal breaker. And that deal breaker comes alive when we start to value our well-being, our wealth, and our health more than we value their approval, more than we value that high that we get with euphoria. That's what self-love is about. It's not about, I feel great about myself. That's a product of self-love. But self-love is an action that says no to things that harm us, that says no to people that are toxic to us, despite how we feel about them. This comes back to this idea of primacy of emotion. If I feel really intensely about somebody, it doesn't equal truth. It doesn't equal that they're a good fit. It doesn't equal that we're supposed to be together. It tells me that there's a lot of neglect. You got some water on that desert of neglect. It came alive. That's what you need to pay attention to. That's what you need to take the time to wrestle with inside yourself, going, yeah, am I willing to start to disbelieve my conclusions I made up about this feeling and this person? Am I willing to start to acknowledge and believe that their behaviors tell the truth? Because if you're stuck in a loop, constantly ruminating and going back over the person, trying to work it out in your head, your brain's trying to make sense of these contradictory experiences. And the way to make it make sense is to put it where it belongs. Abuse toxifies everything else. Because frankly, guys, people who love you, who care about who you are, care about how you feel, will not abuse you. They're going to make mistakes. Shit's going to happen. They may even have a bad habit they need to work out. But they'll work it out. They'll own it. They'll have empathy. They'll have self-awareness. They'll be receptive to your influence because they care about how you feel. That's the definition. That's what defines them or makes them different than abusers. Is people who are non-abusive own their shit and they change it. They work it out. Abusive people don't. They play the victim. They feel entitled. They just want their cookie. This is what we have to acknowledge. We have to do this over and over and over. There isn't an instant I have ever found in this. It could exist. I'm not saying it absolutely doesn't exist. But I have not found a way outside of reinforcing this reality by accessing the truth, the patterns of behavior I can identify in the individual, and how my body feels or felt about that behavior. Sometimes we lose contact with that emotion. We lose contact with the pain. That's why we write it down and we define the pain with it. It's like when X did this, I felt this. Then we ask ourselves a question. How does this fit with what I want in my life? This comes back to the what, how, who model of relating. Because if you know what you want and you know how you want it and the person doesn't align with it, that's the end of the ball game. The relationship doesn't function there. It may not function at all depending on what it is. That would be a deal breaker. Abuse ought to be a deal breaker in your world. That's something you need to come to terms with, determine for yourself. For me, it is an absolute deal breaker. Shows up, I'm done. Because I don't want to tolerate it. Especially, and remember, abuses, they don't take accountability for the action and they don't change it. It's the easiest way to smoke it out is on those terms. This is your place of accountability first. The second place of accountability is to start understanding what you allowed that you knew was hurting you and you didn't confront it. We're going to talk more about that over the next couple of weeks because I've got this cool little idea. I'm going to give you 7 different things to look for to help you understand what your role was in your dynamic so that you can see where to grow and where to heal. Okay? Because I know it's confusing. I know it's a perplexing experience. I know it leaves us with an incredible headache. I mean, I've had migraines, and I would say the migraine wasn't as painful as the headache of this kind of confusion about what is real and what my role in it was, because there are things I did that were wrong, but that didn't justify the abuse. And it wouldn't have made a difference to it anyway. And that's really what I'm getting at here. You could have changed yourself, and you tried, you tried to change yourself and be different, and it still made no difference. This is where that feeling of I'm never enough and I just can never figure it out comes from. It's like this is where the powerlessness results from, is because it does not matter who we become to them. They will never be satisfied because they're not looking for satisfaction that way. They're looking for the benefit of controlling and manipulating you. They're looking for the benefit of you jumping, you dancing to their tune. They're not interested in connection. They're interested in power. They're interested in control. When we come to those terms, we start to open up. Give yourself permission to open up and consider, is it possible that my abuser just wanted to control me? Is it possible that the potential I see they have is just my own fantasy? These are going to be confronting feelings that come up, but they're going to sober you up. They're going to help you start seeing what is real. And then you will make the choices of what's best for you based on that. Because it's in you. You know what's healthy for you based on how you feel. And I'm not talking that euphoria. I'm talking how safe you feel, how valued you feel, how seen you feel, how safe it is to be yourself, to say no, to say yes, to ask for things. Safe, healthy relationships make that natural and normal. They empower you in that space. And you'll have to become accountable to yourself to say, that wasn't happening in this relationship, and I need to acknowledge to myself that I was in undue tolerance. This is another thing with accountability, and this probably might blow your brain a little bit. You need to acknowledge your innocence. You need to acknowledge that your brain was put into a freeze-fawn loop to suck you into the cycle. Now, there's some things previous to that loop being triggered that you need to identify so that you can, head that off for the rest of your life and move towards an advocate position for yourself. But especially if you grew up with this, you're innocent. Especially if you found yourself in a relationship where you were abused, you're innocent. Acknowledging your innocence sets you free from the trap of shame. Okay? Again, we don't earn abuse. Period. You're innocent. Now, your accountability is about power, not about judgment. See, a lot of times in the world, accountability is conflated with judgment. It's conflated with you're wrong, you're bad. It isn't about that. That's toxicity. That's shaming. Accountability says, okay, this is what I did. Now I can do differently. I can do differently because I see how what I did and I did not what I did and did not do produced or contributed to X result. Now if I change that up, I'll get Y result or Z result. It's about compassion, not judgment. Because you are worthy, intrinsically worthy, period. You just were not trained into that worthiness to be aware of it, to own it. I call it innate value. In the Know Yourself membership, we go in deep with that, the happiness strategy. Retrieving value and nurturing it. My friends, I know this is a difficult process. I've done it several times myself. I understand how devastating it can be to acknowledge what is going on. Because these are people we love. These are dreams that we've had. And now we have to willingly put it to death. We have to end it. And I have to confront my role in it. It's a daunting process. I want you to be kind with yourself. I encourage you to approach it. And this is hard to do when the brain's in this state. I get it. Because I was like, oh, I'm just a dumbass. Look at me. I'm stupid. I wasn't stupid. I was traumatized. I was just trying to get my needs met. And that's really what this all breaks down to. Is meeting your needs in the best way you know how. And that's where your innocence comes in. You're just trying to meet your needs. And now you can learn a different way to meet those needs. And that will be a challenging way. There will be a mountain to climb. But that mountain will yield you back yourself. It will yield you the power to have happiness again, and wholeness and well-being, peace, sanity again. It will bring back to you yourself. Because the real journey isn't tolerance of the abuse. The real journey is discovering and accepting your innocence, discovering the validity and legitimacy of your needs and wants, and then building a network in which to meet them in healthy ways. That's what eliminates codependency. Because we no longer, codependency is a survival strategy. It's a set of skills that we have used to try to get needs met. Self-advocacy, happiness after codependency. I don't have a term for it yet. If you guys got a term for it, share it. The way back to happiness, the way back to well-being and wholeness, the self-advocate way, is to change how you get your needs met. It's not to change your needs. It's not to get rid of them. It's not to change your wants or get rid of those. It's to change how you get them met, with whom you get them met. And that is the growth. That's the magic. That's where accountability comes in. It comes in with a question. How does this person's behaviors align with what I need and want? How does this person align with my well-being? Not how do I feel about them, because that's irrelevant. Until you can establish if they're healthy and secure, until you can establish that they're trustworthy and they add to your well-being, the feelings you have about them should not be given any weight. Once they, through their pattern of behavior, have established that they are healthy, that they care about your well-being too, once that's established, then that feelings have weight. Those matter. They're important. This little cliche saying, love or attraction is the reason to explore a relationship, but compatibility is the reason you keep it. We have to become accountable to ourselves, to what we're bypassing in our relationships. And we're bypassing ourselves. We're bypassing our needs, our wants, our voice, our intuition, our body, all in the hopes of chasing and grasping this fantasy and getting this euphoria that we think is real. We're accountable for our fantasy because it's ours. We created it. So that is all for today, my friends. I know this is confronting. I know it's a difficult process, but it's just that, a process, a practice. Another fantasy that we have to own, we have to confront, is that things would be instant. Like, well, I just watched this video or took this course and bloop, it's all done. No. No. I had it too. I had it for years. I had it for about 6 years. It cost me tens of thousands of dollars, thousands of hours. Nope. Didn't work. What I did discover, though, is that when I started applying a consistent practice, the practices I teach specifically in the happiness strategy, in From Addiction, in Heal, that's where things started to change. And then when I added practices to it for relating that are taught in the upcoming relationship strategy, wow, did my world change big time. But I had to start with the foundation of healing. I had to come back to myself. I had to learn to handle the discomfort of confronting my fantasy and the emptiness and loneliness that came after that. Then I had to learn how to nurture myself in those spaces so that I could be available to build healthy connection, which then reduced the loneliness. And then being intraconnected with myself reduced it further. And then just caring for the parts of myself that lived in exile for decades, bringing them home. Through nervous system regulation, through grounding practices, through being present in the body without objection, without judgment, without analysis. It took time. And I practice these things every single day. Yesterday, I had a whole lot of things planned. My body needed me to pay attention to it and work through a really deep wound. The wound of being worthless, having no purpose or value in the world. Because growing up, I experienced the sensation of being replaced. I'm not sure that I was replaced, but I felt like I was. And I've had to wrestle with that, and I finally got into it. And I've been working on that for a long time. So that's a process, it's a practice. And we have to be responsive to ourselves, like how we hope and we would want our parents to have been responsive to ourselves, our spouse, our significant other, to have been responsive to us. This is the rub. If you want support in this, the Heal Yourself membership will help you through that, because you get access to me. We can 3 times a week live mentoring. I can reflect to you. I can hold space with you. I can help you in your journey forward. The tools and guidance in those courses will help you break free. And it's extremely, extremely affordable, $49 a month. It's less than most co-pays out there. And you can start to see for yourself that freedom. Now, this isn't a pitch video, but it's something that is available to you. The community is available to you. Check out support in your community, like your physical community for Codependency Anonymous or Al-Anon. Those are supportive frameworks where you can see you're not alone. But you also have to come down to the accountability. Am I enabling this by ignoring the things they do? Am I maximizing fantasy over reality? So that's the journey. I'm always popping fantasies. Constantly. Because my brain's real good at it. It's like, oh, I got this fantasy. Maybe this person nope. I have no right to define who a person might be. My job is to discover who they are by the way they present themselves over a persistent period of time. I believe in you guys. I know you will do this. I know you will break through. It's in you. It's built into you. But it is a practice and it is a journey of discovery. We've got your back. I've got your back. Be kind with yourself. Go gently. And I will see you guys in our next video.